So my mom just took him to the
Hi, Liz. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad you could join us. Sorry, this is always how it goes the first time. Got to figure out how to, if I can make it any louder.
How often do you usually text us?
Okay, I think we have everyone for today. I want to scoot this a little bit closer so we can
In Austin?
get a better view. Okay.
Well, my grandpa was from Mexico. His parents, dad, and his great.
Can I have your attention?
Oh, yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to take my mask off because I have a very soft voice, which I apologize. So if everyone's okay with that. Liz, can you still hear us okay?
Yes, yes, I can hear. Thanks.
All right, everyone's here, at least for today. We're missing a couple of people that will be joining us next time. So I'm just gonna get my materials here really quick. You guys have your syllabi?
Thank you for your help.
Thank you so much, Susie. Yeah. Thank you. I'm Jamie.
Good to meet you.
Thank you so much, Susie.
You're welcome. Let me know. Otherwise, I don't think if you want me
Thank you so much. Okay. Did you get the syllabus and everything, Liz?
No, I didn't. You know, I got your email, but there wasn't a syllabus with it. So maybe send it again when you have time.
Okay, if you could go back to the email, did you click on the word syllabus?
Oh, maybe that's okay. I'll try that.
Or I might have added an addendum. I don't remember how I
Okay.
did it for you.
Okay. Let me check it out. I'll check it out.
Okay, let me know if you can't find it and I'll send it
Okay.
again really quick.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Okay, good morning. I'm Cameron. And I think we have mostly met. We'll go around and do introductions. Ah, Jared.
I just wanted to come in and say hi, because I know you all are like, I love interrupting a group. Hi, how's everybody doing?
Good.
Well, carry on, and thank you, Cameron, for kicking it off. I will see you all in the next week. Come on, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I'll see you all soon, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Put him through his paces, ask lots of questions.
Oh, God.
Hello for him.
All right. Let me just get myself. So
We'll meet today because we have this.
I'm Cameron. I will start by telling you a little bit about myself, and then we can kind of go around and do some informal introductions and kind of get to know each other just a little bit better. So my name is Cameron. I am pretty new here, which I think is kind of fitting because it's for new people. And I'm actually a member at the Cathedral, St. Mark's, and I'm working here while I am working my way through the ordination process and finishing my master's of religion and theology at United Seminary. So I am, some things I like to do for fun. I enjoy playing the piano. I actually have a bachelor's degree in game design. So I'm gonna make video games. So that's pretty fun. Talk about a career switch. I enjoy sewing quite a bit. I did knitting for like, I don't know, a couple of months, and I like the sewing machine. So
hard to carry around.
they are a lot harder to carry around. That is true. I recently started, I've made all sorts of stuff. I started with clothing and other random apparel items. I recently started making stuffed animals. So that's my latest project with things. And I stay busy with my puppy named Luna, and I have a 10-year-old pet named Adele. So did you find the syllabus, Liz?
No, I didn't. Yeah.
Okay. I will send it real quick and then we will go around And just tell us a little bit about yourself that you would feel comfortable with sharing. Let me see. Would you like the Hotmail or the iCloud address?
The Hotmail one probably, although it went to junk mail, the last one, the other ones didn't go to junk mail, but this last one you sent, the one with the that was supposed to have the syllabus went to junk mail, and I think that may be why. the
Really?
syllabus didn't come through, but
Okay, I just sent it to you, and it should be a Google Doc.
okay, sounds good. Thanks, Cameron.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
All right. May I have a volunteer who would maybe like to share next?
I won't run through it.
We can give you a minute to finish sharing if you like.
Wanna go?
Yeah, I can start. Good morning, my name is Jamie. Jamie Wright, I'm Matt's wife. Introduction, I don't know. I'm a Minnesotan, born here in Minneapolis. Went all through school, college, we went to college at St. Olaf, but then I left for 15 years. So I have only been back in Minnesota for 3 years.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Where did you leave to?
Oh, initially we went to DC where I got my, back up, we went to Seattle. He got his master's there. Then we went to DC, we moved a bunch. Then we were overseas in South Korea for 2 years. And then we were back in Los Angeles for 5. So our older son, LD, was born there, 66. And then we moved to Delaware. So he taught, and he can do his introduction too, but he taught at a Episcopal boarding school in Delaware. So
All right.
he was born in Dover, Delaware, and he was actually baptized at that school. So
Fantastic.
although I was not raised Episcopalian, I was raised United Methodist. That's my mom's side. And my dad's side is all Roman Catholic, so
Okay.
Italian. So my mom's side is Chinese, my dad's side is Italian. They both met in Minneapolis. Their story is way less interesting than people think in a way. But yeah, so anyway, let's see, other personal stuff. So yeah, we have our kids. So in this phase of life, I don't have as much time to do the things I enjoy doing, but I'm a musician also.
Oh, all right.
Um,
Fantastic.
Yeah, not really. I kind of taught myself how to play piano, but I play clarinet and guitar. And in high school, I played saxophone, jazz band,
Wonderful.
music, and I sew as well. Although today it's very practical. I have to sew the patches on his Cub Scouts uniform.
Yeah.
There's no like really fanciful project.
Those are super useful to be able to do. I also played clarinet in high school.
Oh, really?
And then I think in 10th grade, I started playing the flute, and I actually didn't start playing the piano until I was 18. So
Oh, wow, that's
like,
great.
finally, my dad
Yeah.
talked to me about it when I was a kid, though. What are your son's names?
Want to introduce yourself?
I'm
Who are you?
teaching.
He calls himself TT. It's Theo. With
Theo.
tiny T. Yeah.
Tiny T, and
And who's
No.
your brother?
I'm a big boy.
you are a big boy, very big boy.
You know, I'm not big
And-
one to bed wheel.
And I've had other, I was gonna say I've had other careers too, but I'm a teacher. I've taught ESL. I also taught Mandarin Chinese. I speak languages. It's kind of a hobby of mine and also something I've studied, like Wessex. He's actually going to Chinese immersion school. And I teach, but now I teach college readiness. I teach at the International Institute. So
Okay.
my students are all preparing for college year. They're all immigrants. And
Oh, awesome.
but we're online, so I got the job during the pandemic. We still teach remotely, so
That's great work.
yeah, that's really good. My job's great.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. So I guess I shared for me and the family.
No, that's
Another chocolate one. So if you want to pick up where I left off, I don't know. The chocolate things, it's like mini donuts. Here.
Yeah, should I go then?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Matt Wright, from Washington State. Northwest, went to college here, did all the places that James lived.
Yeah, we've been together for 20 years, right? Married for 15.
And, yeah, I'm sort of a historian, teacher, mostly staying home with the kids now. But yeah, well, with him mostly because he's not old enough for school yet. So, and what else? Yeah, I mean, my great grandfather was an Episcopal priest. I was raised sort of a combination of Presbyterian and evangelical. But yeah, I'm sort of like exploring my roots in a way. My great grandfather was, or rather great great grandfather was a priest in Hibbing, Minnesota. Obviously. And anyway, so yeah.
We have his portrait, his priest portrait, right in our
Yes,
house. Yeah.
I think it's like ordination portrait is looking very holy.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
You said you taught at Episcopal?
I did. I taught in an Episcopal boarding school for 2 years in Delaware.
It's still St. Andrew's School.
St. Andrew's School, so all boarding high school. It was very interesting experience. And,
Sunday chapel in the basement of the building we lived in. Just take the elevator down to the chapel, and that's where he was. That's where he was baptized. So, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, we're happy to be here, and we're just looking forward to.
Well, we want to have him baptized.
Yeah,
so
we'll
that's kind of.
totally
yeah.
have him baptized in November. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, yeah. It shows more about me, but I can go into that later.
Thank you. Whatever you feel comfortable.
Yeah,
with.
that's good for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Liz or Tamara?
I can go if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Liz, and I was raised Episcopalian, kind of fell away from the church, like a lot of people when you're a teenager. And I'm an East Side St. Paul lifelong, except when I actually was active duty in the Army and in the Air Force. So I have and retired from the military from the reserves. Anyway, my cousins go to St. John's, and so I was kind of interested in learning more about St. John's and maybe getting back into going to church. I kind of have been avoiding it for a long time, but anyway, Holy Apostles was where I grew up, and that is actually among church now, and it's one of the ones that they share the farmers market with, and so actually kind of been very involved with the farmers market at St. John's because my cousins also help there, and I've been doing a lot of volunteer work at food shelves. I work at Open Arms of Minnesota, which makes meals for people with critical illnesses, and I've also worked at Second Harvest Heartland, and I'm actually trying to be a literacy mentor, so I have an interview on Monday to see if I can help out at a local St. Paul public school. So anyway, that's kind of me.
Well, keep prayers for you that interview goes well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, so
Well, glad you're here.
we'll see.
Well, thank you. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah,
And let me know if you can't hear very well too. I'm always worried about sound. If it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not loud enough. Let me
so
know.
far so good.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And my name is Tamara. I moved here the week after Christmas from Williamsburg, Virginia, although I am a native Michiganian. I was raised Presbyterian, was confirmed in the Episcopal Church, I think, in my early 30s. And I'm half of a couple. My wife works in St. Louis right now, which has not been unusual for us in our career. So I lived in Ohio, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and then back up here to the upper Midwest. I've been a rector's warden in a small church that went through 2 new rectors, so I'm good at orienting new priests to their charge. I've been a chalicist, a lay Eucharistic minister, delegate to diocesan convention, lots of
You've done everything.
and I don't have a whole lot of spare time because I moved here for a job that has demonstrated itself to be much larger than any of us thought it was going to be. But I do knit during the week because it helps me pay attention and helps me remember what goes on in the week.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for taking the time to be here with us.
Yes.
Despite your tight schedule. And feel free to knit away. I just want to see what you make when you're done. That's my only request.
This is a sleep.
Yeah, I was gonna say that looks like a sleep.
A teeny tiny little sleep.
Yeah.
Who is it for?
I make baby sweaters for people I work with, and my last gig was at Virginia Commonwealth University, so this is a VCU baby sweater. This is my last VCU one before I start on a new batch.
Oh, those are adorable. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. This is a weird question, but I took my mask off so everyone can hear me. Did anyone see what I did with it?
And that was
Where
so weird. Where did the mask
Well,
go?
back stuff.
I didn't see it.
Just want to make sure I have it when I need it. Otherwise, I'll just leave it.
Oh, no. That's not true.
Okay, we will worry about that.
Figure it out.
We'll figure that out. Okay. So, did you manage to get the curriculum, Liz?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. It came through. Yeah.
Okay. So, excuse me.
We're getting them settled.
No, that is quite all right. Do what you have to do. All right, so for the overview, this curriculum aims, and follow along if you like, you can just listen. This curriculum aims to provide a general instruction or refresher to the basics of the Episcopal Church. It covers the ways in which we understand the gospel, our history, our worship, and our day-to-day lives. By the end of this course, participants should be able to articulate a basic understanding of what the gospel and the church are, where Anglicanism and the Episcopal Church came from, and key features that characterize our church. So participants are people preparing for sacraments, new to Christianity, new to the Episcopal Church, and also experience Episcopal things, transferring or just wanting to learn a little bit more. So this class will have 6 sessions led by clergy, staff, and volunteers, and concluding in prayer. So we have opening prayer and introductions, interactive presentation, which I will do shortly. And then we'll leave some time for questions or comments. And then we will close with today's daily office. All of the reading is outside of class because we have members who are online as well. So I should say, when I say outside of class, I mean it's optional, it's voluntary. For those who do come in, we have books on the back to go over there that you can either take out as a library loan or you can actually purchase a few of them. But all of them should be listed here. The only one that's not is one that I referenced, which is The Way of Love, The Practical Guide to Following Jesus by Scott Gunn. And then there's another little tiny, or that is the tiny book. His other book is on here, Walk in Love. So I get confused with those two, they're very similar titles. And so that takes us to session 1. So today we're going to talk about Episcopal Beliefs. And this session is just intended to be kind of an introductory session so that we can get to know each other and kind of explore what our beliefs are and kind of what brought us here and what makes the Episcopal Church, or the people who make up the Episcopal Church, unique. So my first question, which is kind of an open-ended question, I encourage you to offer answers, but you don't have to if you don't want to. But my first question is, what drew you to the Episcopal Church in particular? And so I will start. For me, I've kind of had a very long and varied journey throughout my whole life in spirituality. I did not start Christian. My grandfather was a Baptist minister in Oklahoma, and my uncle took his place. So my dad's family was Baptist, and I mostly grew up non-denominational. My dad always wanted us to go to church, but my mom was vehemently against it. And I didn't find out until I went to seminary, almost at 30 years old. I did not find out that my mom was converted, baptized, confirmed Catholic when she was a kid. I went to Catholic school until she was 18, and she just never talked about it. So I was almost 30 years old the first time I found that out. But I was able, because this was my spiritual formation class, and I was able to find the ways in which, even though she never talked about it, it still kind of found its way into my life anyway. I've always loved, I guess, the Catholicism in theory. In practice, I found that it doesn't always align with everything that I believe and want to live into my life. So for me, the middle ground was the Episcopal Church. Now, when I was younger, I did everything I could to avoid Christianity. And I started with Taoism, I did Buddhism, we did Hinduism, we did Western esotericism, everything you could possibly think of except for Christianity. And then through my own soul conversion experience, if you will, I had some pretty amazing visions that were all very explicitly Christian, despite the fact that I never even wanted to step foot into church. And after the third one, I was like, okay, I get the message. And that's a very abridged version of how I arrived here. But the Episcopal Church in particular, it holds a lot of what I find my natural beliefs are. And also I like, which we will discuss later, like the via media aspect of it, of being kind of a blend of Catholic tradition with Protestant ideologies. So that's why I'm here. Would anyone else like to offer what drew you to the Episcopal Church?
I guess. Yeah, I think that I mostly grew up in really non-denominational churches, and I like a lot of, like you said, a lot of aspects of Catholic liturgy. I think the smells the bells aspect is very appealing, right? And I think that even though I think this church is not explicitly Anglo-Catholic, I tend to be attracted to that tradition in particular. But there isn't really an Anglo-Catholic church exactly in the Twin Cities, as far as I know. And so, but this church has a very it does a lot of that actually. There was actually an Anglo-Catholic church in St. Paul that closed. Actually, I was talking to Mark about that. Anyway, but so I think that the liturgy and the tradition ceremony is very attractive. And I think I like that. And theologically, I think it's also very interesting as well. I think this idea of the media expansion, the idea of the combination of scripture and tradition and sort of like reason, I think is very attractive. I think it's an important part of our heritage. I think Christianity is an important part of our heritage. People sort of it's subterranean, right? Whether you realize it or not.
Like you were saying.
About your mother, right? She's sort of very Catholic in so many ways. You had no idea, right? So I think it's an important part of our tradition and our culture. I think it's I find it very interesting to explore, to bring sort of from the subterranean to the surface.
When you were speaking, I was reflecting on that. I was listening, but I was also thinking about, so my dad, I've always known he's Catholic, right? I mean, my grandma still is a Catholic. I don't need to get into that. I mean, she's nearing the end of her life. But lifelong Catholic, right? Like anyway, that's another thing. So I always knew that he was Catholic. I knew his whole story, but like when we were growing up, he put the charge on my mother that she would raise, like she was in charge of our religious education. He didn't want any part of it. So that's why I was raised Methodist. I'm very active in my church, but we would go, like for high holidays, we'd go to my grandparents' church in North Minneapolis. So like for Christmas and Easter, like I go to mass with my grandparents. And I remember the incense. One time I went with my aunt to her church in the suburbs, and they had the censer. It was very interesting because it was one of those modern megachurch style, like very new, like building. But then, like the priest was wearing all the vestments with like the everything, and like had the censer, and was like, so it was this really interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Matt, I like the rites and the Book of Common Prayer and
The church year.
the church year, the liturgical calendar and all of that I wasn't exposed to before. And my dad was an altar boy and did all that catechism and everything, but we didn't learn from him. We didn't learn that. So, but actually, and then we're in service and there's hymns I remember from my church growing up. There was a hymn that I think the tune was different, but I remember from my grandparents' Catholic church. So it feels like a good meshing of what is familiar, but also things I want to explore as an adult. And I also practice meditation and have had an abiding interest in Buddhism, particularly Zen Buddhism or in Korea, Son Buddhism. So when I was in Korea, that's interesting too, because in Korea, Buddhism is more, older people go to practice Buddhism compared to Christianity. So like the Christians in Korea, it's like the younger, at least it was when we lived there like 10 years ago. Yeah. I don't want to say fashionable, but like if you look at the demographics, it's kind of the reverse of here, where it's like younger people are going to Christian churches and old people are Buddhist or some kind of mix. Like his mom was Catholic, right? But then
Catholicism in Korea is a whole different thing. Too.
Yeah.
It's a different situation. Different country.
But what I'm drawn to now is more of the mystical side of Christianity as kind of a way. Like I read a bit of Thomas Merton. I want to finish reading this, but you have a copy of it. Yeah, right. And like Mary, so Mother Mary and Virgin Mary, and that kind of. Is it called the cult of? I don't even know. Like I don't want to call it the cult of Mary, but like contemplating.
It's a cultist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a very long. So I'm saying that, like, it appeals to me because it's familiar, but there's also elements that that I'd like to explore as I develop my journey.
That's fantastic. I'm just going to answer something because it's on topic that I forgot to mention about myself, or maybe I guess didn't mention. That is also one of the reasons that I really enjoy the Episcopal Church too, is the mystical aspect that you find about it. So here's a personal plug. I am currently the only reason I'm not done with my master's degree yet is I'm still working on my thesis. But my thesis is working title, Modern Interpretations of Mysticism through the lens of Pseudo-Dionysius, Thomas Aquinas. So
When we studied
It's very
the
ambitious. That's ambitious.
I know.
It is. Well,
why
we
it
went
takes
to
a long
St.
time.
Olaf, so we took Bible class at St. Olaf, and I remember reading. You read Augustine and Aquinas. I think in my class.
Did you read Pseudo-Dionysius?
No.
Yeah.
But we took the Bible class, and then I took a theology. Actually, my senior year, I took feminist theology class.
Oh, fantastic. I did mine was medieval women mystics. That was the one that like really got me in there. But I feel like I've always been a mystical person in general. But yeah, that is one of the things that I really enjoy about the Episcopal Church. And especially throughout my studies, I think we have an interesting view of what mysticism is, and it's kind of evolved over the centuries. Mysticism is literally just a mystical thought in theology, and now there's kind of a difference, or people differentiate mystical theology from mysticism itself. Anyway, I'm going off of it.
We might have to talk.
Yeah, we can talk more about it. But I was. As I was,
Contemplative, yeah.
yeah, exactly. As I was talking to the dean of St. Mark's, the dean of the cathedral, he kind of pointed that out to me. He's like, "Well, what do you mean by mystical?" It's like the temperament of the Episcopalian is innate. And I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, Yeah, I guess we can put it that way, you know.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, how would you unpack that?
It's, I think because in the Episcopal Church, the tradition is to ask questions. You know, a lot of the answers that we get are even more questions. Like, well, where is the Holy Spirit in this space? How does the Holy Spirit move you? And all of the questions that lead us to the contemplative thought is what leads to a more mystical orientation. I think there are many things mystical about the Catholic Church, but the asking of questions often discouraged, you know, which is what a little bit of a difference is there.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that's what my father struggled with, honestly. I mean, I didn't have too many questions for him at that, but like he studied philosophy in college. He always likes asking, or I thought, yeah, he was more into the asking of questions and being skeptical.
Yeah, I don't think he was able to find a way to reconcile those two.
No,
Yeah.
I haven't asked him recently,
question I
but
think I asked
he's talked about it with him too. But yeah,
No.
no, but he still will have like a book of Aristotle or something. He'll have, he reads the ancient philosophers. But it's a kind of, I don't know where the Catholicism, if he's aware of how it's
So
still,
it's really important.
yeah.
Yeah, well, the entrance of Plato, essentially, and the Platonic thought influenced, I think Aquinas was the first one, so he was a Christian theologian that took a lot of Plato's ideas and kind of inserted into the Christian theology. And so like, in that era, Neoplatonism, Christianity kind of like do that. There's so many similarities that that's kind of how that. Anyway, sorry, I'm taking up too much time
We can
talking
talk about this all
talking
day.
about thesis interests, and I'd like to give time
We can talk about this all day.
for others to also tell us about what brought you to the Episcopal Church.
To college at NYU, which is in the middle of Greenwich Village. And I grew up on a tiny island, a small island in the River. So I went to school from kindergarten to high school about the same people. When I first went to NYU, I was so homesick. And I never did fall off from church. I've been a church goer since infancy. And I went to, as one does on Sunday, I went to church, and there was a Presbyterian church 2 blocks up from my dorm. And the preacher pretty much told us we were all going to hell, and I left church sobbing. And my atheist roommate said she had heard that the music was really good over at Grace Church. So the next Sunday I wandered over to Grace Church, and I fell in love with the liturgy and the music, and really never looked back. And Jamie, when you were talking about the incense and stuff, my mother was Protestant, emphasis on the Protestant part. And
if we're Catholic, it was like, yeah, right.
but she was seriously Protestant. And when we were living in Pennsylvania, she had come. It was one of those times there was orienting a new priest, a puppy priest, at Easter Vigil, and he got really carried away with the incense. I mean, really carried away. Tripped all the fire alarms, and the volunteer fire department came rushing in the back of the church. And my mother, to the day she died, said that was the most interesting church service I've ever been. She just loved that we had church and the fire department and everything else at once. She just thought that was fun.
That reminds some of my Ethiopian students, they burn incense at home and sometimes they trip off the fire.
We call them condoms, on all the fire, the smoke alarms we would put, because otherwise Guy was always tripping the fire alarms, and the fire department got a little irritated.
I enjoy that. Thank you.
It'll be.
Liz, do you have?
Oh, let's see. Well, it's interesting that there's a couple of references to Buddhism, and I toyed with Buddhism for probably like 20 years. And to me, it kind of was not really a religion. It was kind of more like understanding your mind. And I still kind of think of it like that. And, and I think it was good to learn about it. But like, for instance, when I kind of think of Episcopalian, or maybe what your religion was when you were a little kid, as kind of like a little baby bird imprinting. So I kind of got imprinted with Episcopalian and the whole liturgy. And, and I was in the choir, and you kind of, when you're in the choir and you go to church every Sunday, you kind of, in your long-term memory, you get all these prayers and phrases that you just can't get rid of. And so when I first went to Tucson, I lived there for 4 years, and I was pretty lonely because I didn't have any friends there. But anyway, there was a very nice Episcopal church, and I started going. And it was very comforting because the service, wherever you go in the United States, the service is basically the same. So it's a kind of a comforting feeling to know the prayers and to know the order of the service, So anyway, I like that. Anyway, I do like the liturgy, and I like so now, like, if I do listen online to like a service, it's very nice to have that feeling of comfort. So I actually took 3 trips to Southeast Asia to visit Buddhist countries, because I kind of wanted to see, like, here in America, we're mostly Christian, and this is how it operates. And I kind of wanted to see what a Buddhist country would operate like. So my first trip was to Bhutan. And then I went to Myanmar before all the trouble happened. And then right before COVID, I went on a trip to Nepal, which is mostly Hindu, but there's still kind of a Buddhist influence there. And it's kind of a combination of Hinduism and Buddhism. And I actually went on a trek to the base camp of Mount Everest, and then came home, and that was like in November. And then, then everything changed kind of like in January. So, but anyway, I do like the Episcopal Church. I'm attracted to Catholicism too, but it's, most of my friends are fallen away Catholics, actually. So I think, yes, there's a lot of them. So,
I have quite a few of those too.
yeah, yeah. So I am, and I think, and I wanted to tell one story about kind of why I got kind of fed up with the Episcopal Church when I was a kid.
Yeah.
We had a very traditional minister, and it was during the time when they were toying with the idea of having women priests. And he said from a sermon, he said, if they allow women priests, I'm going to quit. So then they had the big national convention, and they decided to allow women priests. And he didn't quit. I was like, what a hypocrite he is. He shouldn't have said it out loud. And then, a few years later, he did retire, and he apparently opened a restaurant. And I thought he should call it the Last Supper in more ways than one. But anyway, but I do. Anyway, thanks. And I'm glad to be here, by the way, and I'm glad to hear all the stories. It's very good to hear.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And thank you all for participating and being vulnerable and in giving us part of you, because that's what we bring here. And that's kind of, I think, also what makes Episcopal Church what it is our orientation and acknowledgement that we are the body of Christ. We are the living body of Christ, and all of our stories are what make us a part of this. So thank you all. Any other comments anyone has before we move on to our next section? Also, you can tell me to slow down too. I just want to make sure we get all the time. So that segue, I guess, leads into what I have observed and learned and kind of read about makes the Episcopal Church and us as the body of Christ unique is that our orientation, not only mystical, but is to a life of prayer. And when I say that, I mean that the way that we acknowledge prayer is very much an embodied form of about doing.
The child.
He's entertaining
Well,
So the first question that I have for you all is, what does prayer mean for you? Years and years ago, if I answered that question, I would have said, well, prayer is a compilation of beautiful poetry or prose meant to inspire, I guess, an awe or connection to the divine. That's kind of an ad-lib definition of prayer. But that's what I would think of it as. I would think of it as me saying specific words at a specific time for a specific reason. But how do you view prayer in your own life and experience?
That's my game.
sorry. Yes.
I love my game.
Also, I think every voice is indeed a conduit for the voice of God. And even in these moments, I tell us that perhaps this is a moment to stop and reflect on what we're hearing. Don't be embarrassed is another.
Well, and Buddhism too, and being mindful and just present with what's happening.
Yeah.
It's been really helpful for me.
Yeah.
And what is this teaching me? What is this saying? And telling me to listen, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
kind of answering the question, actually. But yeah.
Yeah.
My mother always used to pray when she was driving to work. She would tell me that she would pray. That's not me, but that was one model of prayer for me.
Mhm.
It has changed over. Sometimes when I'm meditating, I'm praying. But otherwise, I liked how you said it. I couldn't have said it better, but
Mhm.
sometimes it needs words. Sometimes it doesn't need words. Sometimes it's just an entreaty or something. I don't know. A lot of times it's like help, like I'm stuck or I'm struggling, you know. And then waiting and then being receptive. So it's kind of like a signal going out and then like receptively waiting for the message or the lesson to.
Holy cyberspace.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah.
You can, it almost sounds like you're talking about a conference.
Yeah. Or what did my, so, and she's dearly departed now, but she was one of our youth leaders when we went to ASP, Appalachia Service Project, or her husband was one of my leaders in high school. So I got more involved in the church as I got up to confirmation and then high school. It's kind of after high school I stopped going, but it wasn't really, it just kind of got neglected. It wasn't like intentional. But she would say, her name was Charlene, and she had cancer, so she passed a while ago. But she would say that I was a sign watcher, or she said that I was a watcher like she was, you know, like we were in the mountains in Kentucky or something. Just that God was giving a sign through the moon shining, or kind of like in the sermon with the trees lighting up, and the look and here it is, and yeah. But you have to be present too, otherwise you miss the transmission. I don't know.
Well, that's kind of a charge you've been given, huh?
Seems like I don't know. But that was in high school. But yeah, so being a watcher of signs, yeah, and making those connections. Where we lived in a house in LA that was called Synchronicity House. So finding those observing those synchronicities.
I think that's amazing, actually. I think that's good advice too. We're not listening. And when I use the word listening, it's not just like waiting for sound, but like if we're not aware,
Receptive, yeah.
receptive, open, we may not hear it. And I do also think of prayer as a form of conversation. I think some people view it as kind of like talking in the darkness and hoping something will hear you, or specifically to God. But I know a lot of people that have expressed, prayers unanswered, which kind of reflects that there's an expectation that there's going to be something that comes back. I think that's an interesting thought.
It's hard, although I struggle with this and have for many years, it's hard not to think of prayer as telling God what to do. And I've gotten better at understanding that if it didn't happen the way I wanted it to, because it wasn't supposed to happen the way I wanted it to.
That ego control, yeah, that's for
Yeah.
me too, but it's like, if I'm more specific, it's less likely to happen in the way that I, right? Like it has to be an ask that's not like super specific to my own experience or my own ego desire.
Well, think about the Lord's Prayer.
Mhm.
It's like,
I will not.
Yeah, exactly.
And so sometimes I think that's kind of, a long time I have to stop and think. When I was younger, I heard that line and I was like, what? Why would that be something that I desire in my own life? Like it kind of takes away the feeling of control, right? Like,
That's a good thing.
Because you're not, because the reality is that you're not.
Right. Right, but young me wants to be in control. Yeah, I want, you want something to happen, and then you get angry that it doesn't. I have a sibling that, and this is also kind of my pet project in seminary too, is theodicy, which of course is kind of the answer to where is God when bad things happen. That's a very simple way of putting it, but I have a sibling who had some pretty unfortunate things happen to them, and kind of has a lost faith in God because they ask why would this happen? Why is all this stuff happening to me? Or why won't God do this when I say it, essentially? And it's hard to explain that relationship. But I'll stop talking for now because I want to hear any other thoughts that we have on what prayer means.
I've gotten better at integrating it into my daily life. Not as a set aside time. I always tell people when they've said something to me that's very difficult, I say, I will pray for you. And because my memory is not what it used to be, I write that down and I keep it on my bathroom mirror so I can pray and brush my teeth at the same time because all the names are there. And I used to be able to just keep them in my head, and I just can't do that. So people now understand what it means when I tell them you're on my bathroom mirror. What that means.
I think that's quite a blessing. You're giving physical space to it too, which I think is a prayer in and of itself.
Well, I hadn't thought of it that way. I just thought of it as memory, but
Yeah, it's memory, it's space, it's intention, all of those things.
In the ritual, or that it's at a certain time, or
Exactly.
it's absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think it means? I think about that, and I think about what do you think it means when you hear to pray unceasingly? Because that makes it sound like you don't do anything but pray. How can that reflect our style of living? Because obviously we have jobs, and we have kids, and we have obligations. What does it mean to pray unceasingly or live a life of prayer?
I didn't quite need to, but when I became a parent, that's when prayer unceasing really happened. Because it was always like, oh God, please tell me what to do next. Because you just talk about losing control. You just lose control of your whole life. And yes, it became unceasing. But when Jared was handing out prayer shawls this morning, talking about how they made every stitch has a prayer in it. I remember as a kind of a newer knitter and being approached about a prayer group, I get to be, how do you not pray with every stitch? I'm always going, okay, please let this go on. So anything I did was a prayer or something or other.
Yeah.
I think it gets back to doing it with intention.
attention and
Consciousness around.
consciousness. And we'll actually get to that in just a little bit. That is I think it's important. I'll put it that way.
Well, it reminds, just real briefly, but like take on what Buddhist teacher, like he talks about like washing your hand, like all these daily activities that people do. They're all, not in the term of prayer, but you can all easily translate it. Yeah.
Right. And well, that's one thing that I was going to say earlier too, is what distinguishes
Doing
meditation and
dishes,
prayer.
washing hands, like all these activities that we do kind of automatically, but like actually infusing them with intention and conscious awareness when we're doing presence. It's just being mindful, but
Right. And where your mind is at too.
you can have the intention directed in the more sacred, right? I mean, I've talked to him about even keeping the Sabbath in the way of like in the Jewish tradition, which we haven't gotten to yet, but just having a holy time or space where that's all you're focused on, whether it's prayer or reading scripture.
Being back at church is part of it.
Yeah, but like during
It's only
Lent,
half the day.
during Lent when we were reading, we had our Bible reading, right?
Yeah, I've thought that myself over and over again. And it's almost it's an internal craving that I have that just hasn't been. I'm saying this and it always sounds like an excuse, right? Well, I don't have time. It's like it'll never be time until I make time.
Yes.
Right. And so, but I know me personally, like I can't live without it. When I go my life and I get out of habit and out of ritual of my own personal connection with the divine, I start feeling bad. I just feel bad. And, in the moment I pick it back up again, it's almost like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to. This is what I'm supposed to feel like.
That's your food.
Right, exactly. Do you have any thoughts, Liz? I want to make
Well,
sure.
Yeah, I think I feel kind of the same way. Like when like for instance, if I did morning prayer online or something, it kind of reminds me of what's important in life, and it reminds me about what it would be to like lead a good life. And so I think that kind of, yeah, that's important. And all this other stuff isn't really that important. So that it's a good thing for me to kind of center and get back to what's really, really important. And I used to work in a hospital, and when I would enter the door of the hospital and walk, it was like an underground entrance to it before I would park, and then I'd walk in this underground entrance to get to the hospital, and I would make the sign of the cross on the way. It was just part of my ritual to kind of like get centered and to kind of be there. And then, I had to go into patients' rooms, and when I would knock, I would like try to, kind of like a Buddhist thing, I would try to say, as you knocked, it was like to kind of just let everything go. You're going to go into the room and focus on whatever the patient says, and it's, again, it was kind of like, it wasn't really a prayer, but it was kind of a centering action to me. So anyway, I do think, and I kind of feel that I can understand how when you're not involved with, thinking about kind of like what it would be to be a good person, then you do start to feel bad about yourself. So in order to kind of just feel better, I think it's nice to pray, and to be thoughtful about it.
Thank you. So that leads me back to my initial statement of embodied prayer, because as we've gotten to, we see how it affects our temperament, our habits, our feelings. It's not only a conversation with God. It literally is our demeanor, or part of our demeanor. And so the Episcopal Church goes off of a phrase of lex orandi, lex identity. You know that. Does anyone, for bonus points, not that I'm keeping track, does anyone know what that translates? Lex orandi. Lex identity.
Like orandi, it's prayer.
Prayer and
right?
Lex is law.
Law. So like the law of prayer and the law of faith.
So
Belief.
it loosely translates to the law of prayer is the law of belief. right? So So it's pretty great that you guys know some Latin. I took 4 years of Latin in high school, and like I remember this much. So
I go to Latin mass.
yeah, I should try that sometime.
It's good practice.
But kind of a very common way of rephrasing that is you are what you pray. You know, if you pray for peace, you may find yourself becoming more peaceful. If you pray for love, you may find yourself becoming more loving. Not just, you don't have to pray like, oh, I want to be more loving, but you pray for the world to see more love, and you start to find yourself acting in more loving ways. And so that's a central element to the Episcopal belief, and that, you know, prayer extends just beyond Sunday worship. Prayer is often encouraged to be practiced at home. I brought my Book of Common Prayer with me. That's also what makes the church unique, and we're going to get there too. Is that we have the Book of Common Prayer, which is a collection of habits and rituals and prayers that everyone can engage in their own language, no matter where they are around the world. And so in that, you have the daily office, which literally gives you times during the day to pray. You know, you can go the super Orthodox Catholic route where you have 7 times in your little book of hours, you know, and you have several times a day that you pray. In the Book of Common Prayer, I think there's 5 times, but most people settle for 1 or 2 times a day. But yeah, prayer shapes your intentions and your actions, not just your beliefs. I think you pray, you say these words every Sunday, and you may go home and repeat the prayers. Or Liz, like you said, sing in the choir, you know, you just may have these in your mind, and that's not insignificant. You know, to have those thoughts kind of running through your mind shapes the way that you view things, which of course shapes the way that you think about them, and shapes the way that you act upon them. So I'm just rolling in this emphasis that prayer is embodied. And that is a very important element for Episcopalians. Right? It is a way of life. So as just a little bit of history, the Book of Common Prayer was first instantiated by Archbishop Thomas Cranmer in 1540. And his intention was to seek a middle path, the Via Media, which we hear a lot in the Episcopal Church, the middle way between the Catholic tradition and the Protestant ideas, because this, of course, is right around the Protestant Reformation, during the Protestant Reformation. And so he wanted to say, okay, we're going to keep these traditions. Extra bonus points, because I like bonus points. You know where the word tradition comes from and what it means. Anybody?
Yeah, I would like to know.
So tradition comes from the word traditio. Latin, I was going to say that I pronounced it Italian, but yeah, but it comes from Latin, which means to hand down. Okay, so tradition is that which is handed down.
Or trade.
Yeah, exactly. So wanting to keep that which has been handed down apostolically and ritually, but also kind of give everyone access, not just clergy members and priests, but to have lay people and people at home be able to pray and follow along and read the Bible. Because this is also the time where common people are getting access to the Bible for the first time too. So the Book of Common Prayer was put together for this. And eventually, Thomas Cranmer actually ended up being executed because he was considered a heretic at that time by Queen Elizabeth. So, but his legacy lives on in our church. Not to laugh about it, but it's very tragic. It's actually
It's
awful.
Elizabeth the first, right?
Yep.
Virginia was named after Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a complicated time in the life of the church.
Yeah.
In history of Anglicanism during that time, so.
Very much.
Figuring a lot of things out.
Well, and that was real interesting moving south into Virginia, because in many of the churches I had been to in the northern part of the country, they're a little more Anglo-Catholic, but in Virginia, the church is as low as the rug because of that concern about
Which town
appearing
were
to
you
be papist.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was
Through contract, yeah.
really eye-opening.
Wow. What did you go to those? services by any chance?
With the low as the rug ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got Bruton Parish, which is where we were for 5 years, the one right in the middle of Colonial Williamsburg, yeah, because that is the local parish church. But it was really Protestant Episcopal rather than Protestant Episcopal. Because that was consistent with a lot of the Episcopal churches in Virginia are very low church, yeah.
Well, sort of in Minnesota too, the churches were quite low church as well. It's sort of mixed now, but I think early on, well, I think with high churches, I think like Pennsylvania, New York, like really super high church.
Mhm.
But then like you think it's, I don't know, but they're just like, yeah, I think Minnesota's definitely a mixture.
Well, in my church, and we were on there was a schism in the Methodist. We were just talking about the schism in the Methodist church. I don't know, before I was baptized. Like, because our church was pretty progressive growing up, so I know, because we had openly gay members and everything. So, but like the liturgy felt more like high church in some ways. But I'm talking about my mom's church, not like that, not Catholic church, but still, like a lot of call and response in the service is pretty much exactly what it said. So, yeah.
No, continue.
Presbyterians, when they take communion, stay in their seats. Communion is brought to you because it's just brought to you. You have these little individual cups of grape juice and stuff. And one of my good friends had taken her kids, forget where they went, but it was over Easter and they were going to go to church on Easter, but the only church available was a Methodist. So the first thing her father, who was with them, was upset about was, "Did you get out of your seat? You have to go to the front."
I loved getting out of my seat. That
You
was
stand
one
in
of my
front of the
favorite
church and get
communion.
communion. And then the minister had one chalice and everybody drank out of it. So he was irritated about that. And then you didn't even get to control the chalice, the minister did. And he accidentally spilled it down the front of Mr. Gregory, who leapt up and screamed, "Jesus Christ!" And the people behind him thought he was having a religious experience. So he said, "Amen, amen." He grabbed his two granddaughters up the middle of the church. They didn't even finish the service. He said, "That's it. We're done."
That's a great story.
Shamrock, please continue with your diversions.
I don't want to track the discussion, but when you said the Methodist and the
Methodist,
call
yeah.
response like that, yeah, that was Mr. Gregory.
And I'm trying to remember if we had the common cup though, because I do remember, well, for us, me, it's the grape juice wine thing. Because we always had grape juice, and then when I go to mass with my grandparents, and I did take communion, and he told me we're supposed to do that. I'm like, oh, my grandma was kind of like, she said I could take communion, but like, so I was considered I was kind of an honorary Catholic, and I don't know. I never knew how to cross myself. I never knew when to kneel, but she said I could take communion, but it was wine, and that shocked me the first time that I took communion because we always had grape juice.
Yeah. And another unique thing about the Episcopal Church, I just want to take a minute to just reflect on how diverse each one of our experiences has been. That's pretty incredible. Like all of the things, experiences, and thoughts that we have to offer and bring to this church.
And
Pretty cool.
somewhere I read that the Episcopal Church is amongst denominations is really uniquely a church of people who have come from other traditions
Yeah.
that were much less cradle Episcopalians than people who come as adults, and other denominations are less that way.
I have also read that, and that has also been my personal experience, and I am one of them.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, if we also were one of them,
Yeah.
except Liz, you said you were a cradle Episcopalian.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Did you, she was confirming that you started Episcopalian?
Oh, yeah, yes, yeah, my mom was Lutheran and when she got married and, and then my dad was Episcopalian, so they, went to the Episcopal church and I was baptized Episcopalian. So I don't. yeah. I
Yeah,
think,
but we're reflecting on how that's kind of it seems to be an uncommon experience. But I've heard of, I remember the first time I heard the term cradle Episcopalian. Like I knew what it meant, but I was like, oh, there's a word I didn't realize because there are so many people who seem to come in. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Liz. Did you have?
well, I think my father's mother, so my grandmother was Catholic. And so I think Episcopalian is kind of a nice, middle ground from Catholic and Protestant or Lutheran, because I think it kind of fits with that tradition of the liturgy and all I want to say hoopla, but
Good hoopla.
but-
Karen, the diversity of experience with, I mean, we talked about Buddhism a little bit, but not the majority. The majority was the diversity experience so far
Right.
within, Protestant and Catholic tradition, within Christian tradition. That we can.
Yeah, but also that experience. I mean, currently 3 out of 5 of us can offer some Buddhist insight. I'm not great at it, but in seminary I've taken Buddhist scriptures class, and I audited a Buddhist pastoral care. Yes, I had my regular pastoral care. I did Buddhist pastoral care, so that if I am to, one day along the line, if I finally get ordained and finally become a chaplain, do all my CP and all the things that you have to do, I may find myself sitting with a Buddhist. It'd be pretty cool to be able to speak with them in a common. Anyway,
Well,
that is.
can I make one little
Yeah.
aside? My grandfather gave me a Chinese name when I was born. So my grandfather was born in China. I don't know what they practiced in China. So he converted to Christianity at some point because that church, Methodist church, was his church in Rochester. But my Chinese name means beautiful lotus. So lotus is like a very potent symbol. Oh, how do you say it?
Yeah.
Well, in different dialects, in his dialect, it would sound like Mian. Mi means beautiful. Nianpa or Nianhua. So that's a lotus flower. So like when I was in Korea, they would call me that in Korean. Like when I went to temples, like I would use that as my name. So, yeah, Mian. So yeah, because of the Buddhist temple, because they understood, right? So that's kind of again, I don't want to get it, but that's off the Buddhist track, but like I feel like that's and when I was confirmed, I also had my Chinese name as part of my whole confirmation deed. I had the 2 middle names because it's not on my birth certificate,
Really.
but it is on my confirmation certificate.
So cool.
So
No, and that's wonderful. Like thank you for sharing, because that informs the way that we think and the way that we going back to prayer. But I think that's actually really cool that that's been put on your baptismal certificate, and that's
on my confirmation
Or, I mean,
certificate. I don't know if it's on my baptismal
sorry, I
certificate.
apologize.
Okay.
Your confirmation certificate. That but you brought that with you with the church. I guess what I'm getting at.
And it's something that I'm still working out, like what does that mean?
Yeah.
My birthday, integrate, I guess, into my spiritual life.
Yeah.
Or my calling, or the signs and the symbols and all that.
I have a friend who, just to say lightly, and then we'll move on to the next topic, because, oh gosh, we're running out of time. I do have a friend who is an ordained Zen Buddhist priest who is started going through the discernment process here in the Episcopal Church.
Okay,
Oh,
yes,
really?
I am wondering how that,
Yeah,
Not
it's,
that I need to consciously bring it
yeah, it's complex. That is a conversation we have personally too. So, but to move on,
in. Sorry,
Moving-
everybody.
No,
There's
no,
too
no.
much to talk about.
no, there's so much to talk about. There's never enough time. And honestly, I think it's a good sign that we have too much to talk about and it's not
It feels good to, yeah.
the opposite.
Because I've gone to, well, Clouds and Water, which is in St. Paul, so I would go there on Sundays, but we decided a long time ago that we wanted to go to a church together as a family, we have to make that decision. So
Yeah.
maybe I would start going to like sitting or something.
Yeah.
But it would not be on Sundays. I'm not, I don't want to be doing, yeah, this is my focus, so if I'm doing something. It is on our meditation, it's like, what would be the hyphen, right, the Christian Buddhist or the Buddhist Christian? I don't know how that would work,
Yeah,
if it even needs to have a label, but
Right,
if
right.
Christianity is the center.
yeah, my pastoral care teacher, she's no longer at United Seminary, my seminary. She moved to Chicago and started the Audrey, is a center for chaplains serving women going through cancer or women who are struggling with health issues. Wonderful person. She is a Black lesbian feminist Buddhist practitioner who is also Christian. So she's written books on being a Buddhist Christian, specifically from a womanist perspective. So her name is Dr. Ayo Yetunde. If you're interested in her work, I would share it. But she is
She
one of-
Nigerian?
Sounds like we
Yo,
can
Turkey
Nigerian.
sounds like a Nigerian.
I'm not sure. She
It
might
sounds
be.
like it's there.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but she's amazing. She's one of my favorite people before. Anyway, complete tangent. Moving on. So all of this brings us to the concept of worship. So moving from prayer as an embodied experience, what does worship mean? And while I give everyone a couple of minutes to think about that, I'm going to get some water because my mouth is getting dry from. I'll be right back. Thank you.
It's a Zen center, it's here. And they follow the, was it social?
I thought it was Rinzai.
Was it Rinzai? Yeah. Well, they have they have a line of transmission. Dharma, they call it Dharma transmission.
And that, you said you go to Latin mass, where do you do that?
I go to St. Agnes sometimes.
Has it
Also
been for a while?
to St. Augustine, in South St. Paul. So at the St. Agnes in Frogtown. I mean, St. Agnes in Frogtown has Latin mass. Also, there's like 3 or 4 churches in the metro that do Latin mass. Yeah, the closest to here would be St. Agnes in Frogtown. Yeah. They do ordinary form and extraordinary form both. So they do the Vatican II Mass in Latin, which is sort of interesting. They also do the pre-Vatican II sort of Tridentine Mass.
And that's the one then you're not supposed to do that. Post Vatican II Latin.
Well, you can do both. Well, the Pope now is getting kind of weird about it, but like I think that
What was getting weird?
Pope Benedict was very open about allowing sort of like pre-Vatican II versions of Mass, the Tridentine
That's because
Mass.
you never really do that too.
Well, he had a complex relationship with Vatican II.
Yeah.
I would say. But no, he did. But where it's like
Yeah.
Pope Francis now, it
The
sees
Pope
it
Emeritus.
as a potential schism, basically. But of course, if he starts cutting it off, then they're all going to go to St. Pius X anyway. Basically,
Is that the?
not all of them, but some of them
No,
might.
The one, the schism one, is that the one?
Well, St. Pius X.
Yeah.
Big schism that happened. Yeah. 40.
Yes, Matt was looking into the Catholic thing very seriously. Years ago. Know more about the Latin mass than I do. Even my dad, I don't know if my dad learned
Well, your
Latin.
dad was an altar boy before Vatican II, so he did.
Oh, he knew, but I don't think he remembers. Like, I don't think he's actively trying to remember.
No, it's just embodied with him more than anything.
It's definitely embodied.
Well,
Speaking
coming by. No, that's very interesting. And I mean, I've also had this myself, so it's pretty cool to hear those stories. So thank you for sharing them also. But what does it mean to worship then? Since
It's really. Oh, the word communion, being in
Liz, feel free to jump in.
I guess, yeah, I guess I would say when I think of worship, I think of it more as a group of people, like a community or just a group of people that gather together, you know, versus prayer where it would be just mostly, I guess, by yourself, although you could do prayer with other people also.
We do prayers during our Sunday service too.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think there are many ways to offer prayer. Any other thoughts on what worship?
What is the origin of the word worship? I don't, but I'm anticipating you know it, and that's going to illuminate my thinking.
So I actually don't know the etymology of worship.
That's
I know what it means, but I can look it up for you really quick.
I don't think that's a word.
That's like an Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah.
Worship.
That's entitled. Worship.
It comes from the Old English word "lordship." I don't know how to
Oh, sounds like Welsh.
pronounce it, but it means worthiness or acknowledgement of worth.
Acknowledgement of worth, but as a verb, right?
Mhm.
Actively acknowledge worth.
Right. So in The Way of Love, the author Scott Dunn defines worship as observing with reverence or prayer and acts of adoration or otherwise sharing love and obedience to a deity. Which I thought was a pretty cool definition. And I can look into etymology a little bit deeper some other time, or anybody can do etymological research if they would like. But so that's how he defines it. And I think in the Episcopal Church, much like you were saying, Liz, there is an important aspect of being a community for worship. Because with that definition, conversely to what you were saying about prayer, I think worship could also happen in a personal space, and on a personal level too. You know, you could have a home altar and still worship God and not be in the church itself or in the community. But in the Episcopal Church, there's an emphasis on the communal aspect. In fact, the Book of Common Prayer says itself that all persons in church shall engage in regular participation in the public worship of church.
And looking, it says that one of the synonyms for worship is adoration.
Mhm.
Looking up, and I knew this rang a bell, but the Catechism says adoration is the lifting up of the heart and mind to God, asking nothing but to enjoy God's presence. And that kind of is where my mindset is about worship. Prayer is kind of a two-way thing, and worship is more of a us to God kind of thing.
That's fantastic. Thank you for looking that up and sharing that with us. I think that is an important element.
This is my BCP combo.
Oh, Bible and.
No,
I
Oh, no.
yeah, I've got
choristers, this is a real advantage. You know,
Nice.
that Carry one book. instead
Yeah,
of
right.
two.
Great. I've got mine in my office. In that definition, he also adds that includes hearing the word, acts of devotion, works of charity, and godly conversation.
Service.
Yep, are all parts of worship. But yeah, I do like that definition of adoration on that as well. I have one another thought, but I lost it. Adding to that. It'll come back to me when I'm not thinking about it.
Yes.
That's always how that
In
works.
the middle of the night.
So, and that leads us, and I'm going to speed through this last section here so we can have time to kind of, I think we've kind of blended the lecture and discussion part, but I very much enjoy, we can still take time to have discussion. I just want to be mindful of everybody's time because technically we end at 1. So if you need to go at 1, feel free to do so. But I wouldn't mind staying for a few more minutes to talk. So, and the last topic is worship takes us into liturgy. So this is also a fun one. What does liturgy?
I think of a book,
Plus
like
there's
the
reading,
French word.
right? It's reading.
So we have a book reading. Do you have any thoughts, Liz? No?
What is are you on the, what does liturgy mean? Is that kind of what you said, or? I didn't-
Yep, I'm sorry, yep. What does liturgy mean?
Okay, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to know exactly. Because,
Those liturgy, litany, right? Liturgy, litany.
I'm gonna see if I can find a way to bring the computer a little bit closer, so
yeah, then,
you may be able to hear us better.
yeah.
I don't know how far I can get the card away from the TV, but we will try. Okay, hopefully this will be a little bit better.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Cameron.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So my notes here,
We're probably, yeah.
you're correct.
It's Greek, right?
So yeah, it comes from the Greek word liturgia.
Yeah.
But before I define it for you, I think we all have a common thought that when we hear liturgy, at least me personally, I've also thought that too. If you hear liturgy, I always think it's kind of the words we say and the directions that we follow. But the definition of liturgy is actually public service.
Oh, really?
So
Yeah.
liturgia, the Greek word was a public act or public work. So liturgy is meant to be public work, or an easier way of saying that is offering for the good of the world. So our liturgy is more of how we enact our embodied prayer through worship into the world. It's kind of a more complex than I would have thought about it. But it's kind of the whole thing, really the whole thing. So the last question I had for us to chew on was, who does liturgy in that case?
Oh, Greek.
Yeah, I was thinking the priest could
Or
work, but yeah.
But so all, I mean, the priest leads liturgy, right? So there's like a question of leadership. But it's sort of enacted by congregation.
Right. Right. So we are actually always a part of the liturgy, and the liturgy doesn't happen without us. Like it doesn't exist. You know, as a team, we have team planning liturgy meetings, right, every week. But the liturgy it's funny because those liturgy planning meetings lead to like a piece of paper that has directions to follow. But the actual liturgy is the work itself. And that is the basis of how our embodied life of prayer leads to our acts in the world. And that's kind of what we take with us, you know.
And I really like the dismissal at this church. I have never heard the dismissal that way, but that makes it very clear.
Yeah, right. We go what did they say? Our service or
Our worship is ended, now our service begins, I think that's what it is.
yep. And I also enjoy that too. Because they have a few different calls that they say. But having gone to St. Mark's as my home church, I had never heard it the way it's said here either, too, which is really So that's all I had for today in terms of like teaching.
Do you want to talk about right one and right two?
Oh yeah.
I have a
Sorry.
question.
It's a good thing to talk about this briefly.
I forgot.
I have one question.
Okay, it's the last thing though, it's the last thing.
Yeah.
Wait, you don't call it that here though, but we would call it the benediction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
so
So,
what is that word? Oh, yeah, benediction,
so
but you don't use it. But we always-
So benediction, so that's Latin. Bene is good. So it's giving a blessing. A benediction itself is a blessing. And so,
Speaking good.
yes. Yeah, so it's that's the literal translation would be to speak of good things, but a benediction from a priest is like clearing of all sin, right? It's giving the goodness that is the word of God,
that
essentially.
we're going forth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I just had a quick note about right one versus right two, because when I first started, I was like, what does that even mean? Right. So right one and right two essentially spring from, right two is a modern day adaptation of kind of the old liturgy, if you will. So right one is almost exactly what was written in 1549. And so there's to have both right one and right two was part of the via media aspect, which was to keep the tradition of old with updated with the
It wasn't 79 with the BCP revision. That
Yep.
was that was
well, so our current one is 79.
right.
I think when they added right two, it was in 17.
Oh, it's even older than that. I realized
Yeah.
that. Okay, that's
Yeah,
BCP.
so it was like,
I thought right
Yeah.
two came in with the 79 prayer book, because
Because my mom's, my grandmother's BCP.
Yeah, your
little,
mom
like
would-
white thing.
it's a 1928 one.
Yeah,
Which
28
is
one.
the
Yeah,
classic.
which doesn't, there's no right two in that.
No,
oh,
there
okay,
isn't.
so maybe you guys are correct then.
Well, I think it was revised in just like you said in the 18th century too.
Okay, yeah,
But I'm not sure if the 18th century revision is what we now know as right one,
okay.
possibly.
Was that her
I'm
grandpa's?
not sure. It was my
Oh.
great grandfather was a priest.
I've got a 28 at home someplace.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no like right two in that. I don't believe it's all just strictly
Yeah.
these and those. It's all like very like
So maybe, sorry, excuse me.
Okay.
All the coughing, gotta get all the
Sorry.
fresh in my lungs. So.
See, I really like right one much better because it's in my long-term memory, because when I was a kid, it was all back in the old one, so like when I look at right two, I'm like, ugh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I was gonna ask you, do you remember
Yeah.
when it went from 28 to 79?
Yeah,
I was,
yeah, like, it changed, after I stopped going to church, then it changed, so now when I'm kind of coming back, when I hear a prayer or something, I'm like going, that's not quite right, But anyway, there, like I said before, there's like comfort in the long-term memory. So for me, I kind of like the older version, but it's just, I know why they did it. They want to keep it modern so that people can relate to the language. Thee and thou, I mean, kids aren't going to relate to that.
It makes it special though. I think that's the thing about
Yeah.
liturgy in a way too.
Right.
Liturgy has a language that elevates it above sort of the quotidian sort of concern in a way. It is speaking. That's why Latin Mass is nice in a way,
Right.
because sort of you're using language in a way that is itself almost sacralized.
Right,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So you're speaking sort of to God as you're speaking to your neighbor.
right,
You're speaking together as a community. If you're doing liturgy, right, together in community with people, having a different way of speaking sometimes helps to put you in that mindset of worship.
Well, it reminds me of what you said too, right? You don't want it to be about you.
Right.
That it's
Right,
not about
right.
me, it's not about my preferences, it's not even sometimes about what I believe. It's
Right.
about what I practice.
Right. That's a really good point, and I 100% agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
But that also is why the Episcopal Church is the Via Media.
Right. Does both.
Right. Because
Even in this church, the 8 o'clock service is right one.
right.
So,
Right.
which I like. So,
But I think about the Via
and like not all
Media,
Episcopal churches do a right one service.
But
Right?
in
You
the
know,
right
any of the
two-
churches in St. Paul that do right one. Might be
Did
the only
you-
one.
Did you know there's also a rite free?
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
that
at
like-
St. Mark's during Rite 2, they have a small chapel where Rite 3 is done. And I've never been to that, which is even more it's even more
Oh,
modern.
even more
It's like 30 minutes
In
long.
in Regina worship, is that the right three one?
I don't know the title of it actually, but yeah.
These are the things you learn when you're raising up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, see, I think I should start asking Tamara for some inner wisdom here.
You know, I was just, for Liz, I was remembering the manifold and break something or other and thinking of manifold like in a car. Some of the language in the old prayers was not meant to illuminate understanding,
No.
but it was real heavy on the comfort.
But rewards
Yeah.
study in a way too, right? And if you think
Right.
about it, if you think about it as a text, you know, that one can read and learn about, oh, I didn't know we could use that word in that way, right? And it becomes a specific way in which you use that word,
and then you access.
you know,
it a little
and then you
bit.
can sort of access it, but it requires a little more effort,
Right.
right? Which is
Right.
not bad.
But the Via Media aspect, there's the rites, but then as we've observed when you're in church too, in the service, that some people are crossing themselves, some people
Yeah.
are not, some people are
Kneeling.
and it's so like at the same time as it is what appeals to me, it's also can be kind of confusing, the
Mhm.
immediate part, like, because part of me wants it, but everyone does the same.
Mhm.
But then recognizing that part of what's appealing to me is that we're not all doing it the same, because
Right.
like when we've been to Catholic churches and heart feeling like outsiders and not feeling the kind of welcome we felt here.
Right.
That it feels more insular and it feels more like they're looking at us kind of like, why are you here? You know,
Right.
sharing the experiences that we have, you know,
Right.
like, well, and a lot of people are being cradle Catholics, which means they're great because a lot of Catholics are cradle Catholics,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
No more mistake.
Right.
Yeah, and they
Yeah,
don't
they
know
have
how
very
to
few
relate to
converts.
it. Yeah, like who are these people who, you know? I mean, I'm overstating it, and I never actually asked them about it, but that was kind of the feeling, right?
Yeah. Right.
So the Via Media is the way that allows me to feel like I'm a part of this, but that's that tension of like always feeling like, how do we navigate? Like, what are we supposed to do? You know?
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes wanting someone to tell you, but then recognizing that they'd probably say it's okay to practice in a different way. Yeah.
Right, exactly. There's options there. But I totally get the same feeling. When I first showed up to the cathedral, I thought the same thing. I was like, what things am I supposed to do? Like, which ones am I not supposed to do? I don't know.
And you
then
want to know the comfort or the right? Like,
Right.
yeah.
and then I've had Catholic friends come with me, and then they do the whole, the whole Catholic thing. And they're like, why aren't you kneeling? At the cruise? I was like, I didn't go to Catholic school. So, but anyway, we can continue talking if you'd like, but I personally would like to close this out in prayer really quickly, and then we could just have social time if you want and kind of continue some conversations. Or if you have to go, you can totally take off. I personally will probably only be here for another 15 minutes or so because I got to pack up everything too. So, but I want to I'm enjoying myself and I want to keep up the momentum because I want this to be an enjoyable experience for everybody and continue to be for the next few weeks. So,
The kids.
the Lord be with you.
And
And also with you.
Let us pray. This is from today's daily office. Lord Jesus Christ, you said to your apostles, peace I give to you, my peace I leave with you. Regard not our sins, but the faith of your church, and give to us the peace and unity of that heavenly city, where with the Father and the Holy Spirit you live and reign now and forever. Amen. Thanks be to God. All right.
Thank you, guys. I'm gonna sign off, but I enjoyed it. It was fun. See you
Bye-bye.
again. Okay,
Next time.
bye.
Yeah.
You're one of the PC.
I'm the linguist.
Oh,
you
we
can
do, yeah.
hear it.
Okay.
Yeah, we do.
You will enjoy it.
I need to get a 28 one though. I say like
like an
my
art
grandma's, but so
The articles of